Hello, everyone. Welcome to eLearnChat, where it's all about learning. My name is Rick Zanotti, and I may be joined today by Leslie Price. We had her on with Skype, but we had a lot of Skype issues this morning, and she's trying to get in through vMix call. We're going to catch her mid-flight if she can get in. We're not sure what's going on today. Our internet's fine. So somewhere down the road, there's some issues with some servers somewhere. And next to me is Ajay Pangarkar. You know him. This is his first appearance of 2021. He only has 300 to go, and we should be doing well. So Ajay's a good friend, and we're glad he could make it last moment. And how you doing, Ajay?
I'm good. Apparently the gremlins are freaking out.
Yeah, and it's,
I had a bit of issue getting in too, so...
Yeah, we know it's not on our end. We because our internet's fine. We're getting the bandwidth we pay for. But something's going on with Skype because we were getting somewhere between 1 to 5 and 6 seconds of delay. That's a lot of delay for Skype. And then you couldn't even hear us through Skype. Or you could hear us. No, you couldn't hear us. So we put you on vMix call, and here we are. Let's run the intro, and if Leslie joined us, we will get her right back in. Here we go. More and more people are working remotely every day. Your company may already be remote. You may be new to working remotely, whether you're a worker or a manager. Working remotely has some challenges and some very good points to it as well. In our training, we'll make sure that you learn how to work remotely, how to build trust, how to do all the things that make remote working successful. And we'll also talk about some of the pitfalls and what to avoid. Working remotely for workers and managers. It's our new course on Udemy. Thanks. This show is sponsored by Relay Corporation, Digital Learning, Corporate Video, Learning Design, and Management Consulting. Visit us at www.relatecasts.net. Thanks. And we are back. And no Leslie yet. Okay.
No, just us.
We'll see if we can get her on later. It's just one of those days, folks. One thing people don't realize, when you do a live show, there are so many variables you can't control, especially when you get out to the internet. Skype is one of them. It's been running pretty well lately, but things can happen with Skype. We're finding out that Skype is running better on Skype for web. If you haven't tried Skype for web, give that a shot. That goes right through a website. You don't have to have the app loaded or anything, and it seems to work pretty well. So that's just an aside that we're finding is seeming to work better than the standard app, which is installed on your machine. We'll see if that continues to work well. Anyway, Ajay, how you doing? And by the way, Harold is running our show. He's the video producer. He's in the background. Ajay,
It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's very good to see you always. And today we're talking about CLO.
Yep.
Is that a cereal or no? I'm just kidding. What is a CLO?
Typically the acronym is, of course, if you're living under a rock in L&D and you don't know it, then we have issues. You have bigger issues in not knowing what these initials mean. But it's Chief Learning Officer, and basically this is a really relatively recent role. I mean, it's been around maybe, let's say, 10 to 20 years max.
About at least a decade, right?
Yeah. And so this role is now, that seat at the table, right? It's that table we talk about. The decisions are made for the business, and this is that officer's role to lead the learning function in terms of making a business impact. And so the Chief Learning Officer is a really significant play here, because alongside roles like Chief Operating Officer, Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Technology Officer, all these senior operational roles, now we have a Chief Learning Officer. And so it's a big deal, and I think we need to give it the respect it deserves. And the people who are sitting in those roles also need to have the respect for the role, its intention of the role as well. So it's an important point.
And it's very interesting because in a lot of cases, CLOs are not at the table with all the other Cs. they usually report to groups like HR or talent management or whatever you want to call it. And I've seen that in quite a few organizations where they have a role, but it's not an overarching role, which technically it should be. I've seen, I don't know, Ajay, have you seen a lot of places which have what I call distributed learning responsibilities? You have a lot of different departments. You've got ops, you've got sales, you've got marketing, you've got HR, accounting, and you may have different learning groups for each one of those. Which basically creates a Tower of Babel of junk. There's a lot of messes in some of I've just seen it way too many times. It's pretty disastrous. So there's no standard. There's no standard.
Yeah.
There's no accountability in any one group for what's going on. And there's not a lot of communication between groups. So these are all issues that we've seen. And what are some of your experiences? Because I agree with you. The CLO should be at the table. And also, this is another thing. A lot of CLOs are not really responsible for the tech part of it. They're responsible kind of for the learning part of it, but they're not really responsible for tech, integration, and how that stuff works. A lot of CLOs are not technical, which puts them, to me, at a high disadvantage. They don't know what the tools are or what they can do with those tools.
It's an interesting point to be in. And before I continue, to say hello to Leslie. I think she joined us here, so we're a group again. Yay!
Can you hear us, Leslie?
Yeah,
oh,
I
great.
can hear you and see you.
Okay, great.
Excellent.
Well, today it's CLO time. We're talking about CLOs. I don't know when you came on, how much you heard.
Nothing.
Okay. Well, we're just talking about the role of a CLO, good, bad, and different, and where they are in reality. Okay, Ajay.
So here's the deal, right? I mean, let's take a couple of steps back. And before the CLO role sort of appeared, we were, when I say we, the collective we of learning and development, was sort of shoved under sort of VP of HR and that kind of role. So we got bundled up. Now, you bring some really valid points, Rick, where the CLO is an overarching it's sort of, we extracted that learning part, the training and development part, and put it on its own merit as far as having that role of a CLO. Now, the reason we did that is because, as we've discussed in past shows, the three of us, is that learning has gained a significant amount of prominence in organizations. It's within the top 5 worries of CEOs. And so there's that focus. Now, to your point, the CLO is that overarching, just like a CEO and a chief operating officer looks over the whole organization. They're looking over the whole organization, so they need their I guess what did he call them? Their soldiers, or their lead soldiers, in the operations to look over each of the operations. So you may have a director of learning within different segments of the operation. So that's the distributed model can work if you have the focused leadership. And as part of technology, you're absolutely right. I think more and more we're a little bit of an anomaly as far as a role in business, in the sense that we're responsible for the knowledge within people, but how that knowledge is distributed or imparted into people is the issue. Because again, we have technology playing a significant role into how we do that through blended and e-learning tools and LMSs and all this kind of wonderful stuff that we have. So there's a lot of technology functions that go into it. So the skill set, the CEO, if you're aspiring to become a CLO with an organization, better be well diverse between a business, good business, solid business foundation, a good technology foundation, and of course, naturally, a learning, an understanding of learning. That should be your primary focus. Of course,
the role doesn't really. The words like CLO is not really a term that's used in the UK, so I can't help you in this chat.
So what is used in the UK, Leslie?
Head of L&D, director of learning. It's not, CLO is a chief loan organizer.
Learning officer. Yeah.
No, not learning.
Yeah.
Not learning. It's loan. It's CLO is actually a financial. CLO is a financial term.
But there is a person in Europe and the UK, of course, that heads up the learning for the organization as a whole. So we can call it whatever we like. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a person that has a significant responsibility to connect the learning, not just for the sake of learning, but the learning for the sake of performance and managing change within the organization. And whether that be called director of learning or a chief learning officer, I think the North American slant of it, of chief learning officer, was to bring it to the level of similar to like a chief operating officer and a chief, that kind of stuff, just to give it that prominence.
It's very, 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 very different in the UK.
But there's still a director, right? A senior director or vice president of
Not
learning
always.
within. Okay.
No, not always.
Because I remember
Very
when I used to
often.
work for this is going back years, but I used to work for ABB. They were they're a Sweden Swiss conglomerate, and I was at the head office out of Montreal in Canada for the Canadian head office. And I remember back then, I mean, we had, of course, we had the VP of HR, but we also had a senior director. We at the time it wasn't called learning development; it's called training and something, employee training and growth or something like that.
Yeah.
And that role was basically the offshoot of the VP, but they also had a seat at the Canadian head office table, meaning that they were responsible for ensuring that the right training was being deployed within the organization. Now, this is going back 20 years or more. So even then, that was a little bit progressive for them. So I can't speak for the UK, but I know that European organization was in the forthright. To think about it too, I mean, think about ABB. I mean, they're an engineering firm, right? They're a power distribution. So all their workers, or most of their workers, I wouldn't say most, but a significant amount of their workers are knowledge workers, right? They're engineers, they're designers, they're whatever that are in there that are creating these concepts. So the role of learning within that organization was very significant and to be continuous too. So it led to the success of whatever that company has to do. So all I'm trying to say is that in today, number one, whatever we call it, it doesn't really matter. But serious organizations have taken the responsibility to place a person that will lead the learning function at the highest level of the organization. And that speaks to the level of strategy within the organization. So the decisions that are made and the direction the organization takes, this person is playing a significant role in helping that. So it's not just bundled up into HR. I think a senior HR person at the table, and that speaks volumes to organizations who actually take this seriously.
No, it could also be someone who doesn't have the title of quote unquote CLO, but is a director or vice president of training, which does the same role.
Yeah, like I said, tomato. I don't really care what you call it.
Yeah,
it's whether we call it CLO or not. I mean, that's the colloquialism here in North America.
That's the current term. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, the point being is that there is always somebody now. Let me qualify this. There is somebody in these progressive organizations that have a responsibility to look over that, and so it speaks volumes. I mean, I've used these examples before. If you walk into a Toyota or a Starbucks or a Google or an Amazon or even a Walmart, these head offices have people who are overseeing that significantly. I know for a fact when I worked with Nest and Apple, they had people who were just focused on learning at the highest level to make sure that this organization people have their right skills, not just for today, but for their future outlook within 5 years of where the company needs to be. So at the end of the day, I mean, I know a lot of people are probably watching and saying, well, I'll never become a CLO. That's fine. But your role as an instructional designer or a trainer or whatever it may be in your role as far as learning, you need to reemphasize that your expertise was hired for learning, but at the end of the day, your role is to improve performance for the business. And at the end of the day, that's the key here, right? That's that you want that seat at the table. You want that decision-making responsibility. You want to be part of the conversation about where the organization is going. Well, step it up and understand that linkage and that connection. Okay, I'm done with my rant now.
Yeah.
So Leslie usually challenges me here at this point. So I don't know. Maybe this is Marcus in the
because we have heads of learning or heads of learning and development. It's it's different.
But I'd say it's
Okay,
along
so
the same lines.
well, what's different about, let's say, the person that's responsible for learning within an organization, say a major organization in the UK, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think
I
of a
know I'm
large
not saying
UK.
that. I'm not saying that. And I agree with you that they've got to be responsible for performance improvement. But it's trying to actually make a difference and demonstrate performance improvement is the bit that's actually the challenging bit.
And we spoke, I think we've spoken about this to a certain extent before. The role of the senior leadership team within an organization. I'm talking that C-level suite of people that there's only, I always tell, and both of you know I teach accounting and I help the accreditation of accounting, and the accounting function here in Canada and around the world for that matter is evolving, where accountants are not just accountants anymore, they're decision makers. And I tell them three things, and I tell this to every commerce student or business student I teach at university as well. The business leaders of your organization are preoccupied with only three things constantly, and they're like, three things only? I mean, the CEO, three things. They're concerned about performance, change, and risk. And everything that fall in the organization falls under one of those three things or a combination of those three things. And they're not mutually exclusive. So when we're looking at performance, change, and risk, they're all encompassed in what we term, in business term, call a performance framework, right? A performance structure. And all organizations have some form of performance structure. And that performance structure encompasses everything that the company needs to focus on and cascaded down to the lowest levels. Now, that being said, that focus on performance, of course, change happens continuously now. I mean, look at this pandemic we're in, right? Around the world. Companies didn't foresee this happening. I mean, they probably foresaw it as a risk on a very geographical, a very focused or targeted areas, but they didn't focus this on a global scale. And so, when these kind of black swans come along and hit an organization, it really puts their strategies into, a tailspin. Some organizations have been benefiting significantly from it, aka Amazon, or any type of company that has an online presence. And then there's organizations that are just, who are restaurant. We look at restaurants and retail, brick and mortar retailers are suffering tremendously from this. So the pivot right now is like, so let's work with that as far as L&D. What happens here? The risk has hit them sideways, right? Now, if they're going back, revisiting the strategic plans, which I assume they are, they're looking back and saying, okay, what happens when the next pandemic happens? Not if the next pandemic, when the next pandemic happens. And they put these plans into place, but what they now are looking at the risk and the change that takes place. And when you have risk and change takes place, learning follows right behind it. And so you be sure that the heads of learning within all organizations are on their phones are right next to them, ready to act and be proactive on how to help mitigate and manage the changes happening in the organizations right now. So we have a really significant role to play, and that's why senior leadership, whatever you call that senior leadership in learning, is so essential to the success of organizations today. And it blows my mind when an L&D person comes up to me and says, well, they don't take me as important, or I don't think they value learning. Excuse my language here. Well, maybe I should say it on air, but bull crap or bullhickey, whatever you want to call it, you know what the rest of the word is. That's crap. And if you're working for an organization like that, I've said it before, then they're not going to be around very long. And when I say not very long, it could be a year, it could be 10 years, but eventually they're going to go by the way to dodo bird because they're not focusing on learning.
So what would you think the background of a good CLO should be?
So first and foremost, I mean, a good, of course, they should have success within the learning function, and they should have a really solid, holistic look at understanding what is the learning function, and it's not just about training, right? We know, smart L&D people recognize that learning is not just what we used to think about it 4 years ago. We send somebody into a class. Learning is such a dynamic environment now through a lot of sources that hit the organization in terms of knowledge. That's one. So that holistic look, they have to be a bit of that Renaissance person when it comes to learning, understanding all the elements that go into making an effective learning program or a strategy, I should say. Then, of course, subsequently, and these are very close seconds, and I didn't say third, but close seconds, is of course they should have a very solid foundation in understanding how the business functions. Right? They don't have to be business experts. I've said that before. People try to paint me in a corner saying, "You want us to be business experts?" No, there are people in organizations that are hard to do that, just like you're hard to do learning. They have to have a business literacy, and this is why at minimum you should maybe have a sort of a go back and get an MBA to get that kind of background, or something that will provide you with that basis of business literacy to understand how the cogs in the wheel work. And of course, to your point, Rick, the very close second, of course, which organizations can't live without, is technology. Like every function in the organization, whether you're leading technology or not, it doesn't matter. If you're the marketing officer, you have to understand technology. If you're the operations officer, you have to understand technology. So learning is no different. And we keep pushing technology as far as learning. So we don't have to be experts again. We have people in the IT department who are leading that, the chief technology officers who know this stuff. But we have to have some at least literacy to have at least an intelligent conversation with them. And know, have them understand our needs and how to position it so we can deploy our learning appropriately to make sure we affect the performance and gain the objectives of the strategy of the organization to manage the change in the risk and the performance the leadership requires.
Harold, any questions in the chat room or comments? At the moment, okay.
No, because I got a topic that just and I don't want to intimidate people here. I really don't. I want to make it so simple, but this business topic tends to intimidate people a bit when it comes to finance and numbers. And maybe not you two, but in general, when people sort of eyes glaze over, right? I mean, you talk about finance and money and accounting and business, people sort of like fear this, and they shouldn't, because it's really not that difficult. But it would make you such a value to your organization. I mean. You and I, the three of us have discussed this on I think last session I was on, where we talk. Get out of your cubicle, get out of your chair. Let's park the CLO thing aside for a second. You as an L&D person, go talk to the people using your product and services, meaning in your product and services, that training and that learning. Get out there and talk to them. They're your customers, right? They're the ones you're trying to address and solve their problem and their needs. So what's your problem is sitting in the office assuming things. Never do that. Become their therapist, become their counsel, become their ally, and say, hey, you have, again, going back to performance and risk and change, go up there and ask them questions. What's your performance objectives? What changes are you facing within your department? Do we fit into that? Can we help you?
But Ajay, first of all, you've actually got to become their friend, and you don't do that by sending emails to people who are sitting next to you. And that's what that is exactly what I used to tell my team, that you don't send, by all means, send emails to people if you need something confirmed and a date confirmed or something else. But otherwise, get off your seat and go and talk to people, get to know the people in the different departments, get to know who they are, get to know what kind of people they are, get to know their interests. It works.
Oh, I agree. You're preaching to the choir here, but you and me and Rick need to get people to understand this, because, I hear so many complaints that, they just come to us and tell us what they need. And we're like order takers. Well, listen, to your point, Leslie, if you're sitting there and taking orders from the manager or the director from their department that, they think they need this training, well, then you're irrelevant. You're not leveraging your expertise. You're the subject expert in learning. You should be getting up and going and becoming their friend and becoming their counsel and listening and understanding their business. Because unless you understand what they're doing and how they're doing and what they need to do, you can't build a solution that meets that.
So, and at the end of the day, Ajay, it's actually your business as well, because if the business doesn't do well, sorry guys, you're out of job.
So, you guys know I wrote an article that if your budget was cut, you deserved it. Because I know it sounds controversial, but it speaks exactly to what Leslie just said. It's your business. If you're not helping them solve their problems in the department, then guess what? You're irrelevant, and you deserve to get your budget cut. And it's not personal, by the way. When business leaders cut budgets, they look around and they keep what is driving value for the organization, and they're cutting what's not. It's called being lean. And so when it's not driving value, they're going to say, well, you haven't proved to us that you deliver any value to us. So why shouldn't we cut your budget? So
we have a comment from the audience that's from Anthony Altieri that says, why do so many in training have the mindset that we are a required function / department without understanding our place in the business? How did we get here?
So I guess that's a bit of a plug. Hi, Anthony. How's it going? I think both of you know Anthony Altieri. I think he's, for me anyways, he's the for me, and I won't position him for anybody else, but for me, he's the ex-API guru. He's a guy that I would turn to just to pick his brain. But Leslie brings up a point, and I think maybe we better address that. But we do, to a certain extent, we are, and Anthony and I get into heated conversations. We talk continuously, but he and I get into discussions about whether training is necessary or not. And to a certain extent, I do side with him that training is not necessary as an essential function. But unfortunately, today, most organizations are driven by knowledge. And the biggest knowledge resource in the organization is people. And without people, you don't have an organization to function. So, but there are ways, speaking of technology, but there are ways to be able to find this information out of what your customers need. XAPI has, we've been pushing this for how long now, and you can do coding within the LMS systems to report back about how well people are performing, and then gear the training and learning according to that performance function, right? Because if you code it properly and set up codes, and I'm not the expert here, and by the way, in the side note, you should, Rick, bring on Anthony once onto the show because he can really talk to you about this. But for me, is that coding within the LMS can help you gear your learning and target it, just like a sniper, very focused on the areas that need to be addressed, even if you don't want to get out of your cubicle and you're begging for that technology. And that's really, really important. I hope that answered your question, Anthony. But you and I should get onto a debate one of these days on Rick's show. So, yeah. So, I'm surprised I haven't got Leslie heated it up here. I'm trying to be controversial somewhere, Leslie. I'm trying to get that Scottish controversy out of you.
No, I'm usually quite knackered now on a Thursday because, as you know, I now, if you've seen on Facebook, I now look after my grandson on a Thursday, and I'm up early on a Thursday morning, out the house by 7:20 and 7:25 and pick him up between 10 to 8 and 8 o'clock in the morning. And then his mum collects him between 4:30 and 5. And if you could only see the mess that is behind me at the moment.
Well, hopefully you'll get some rest after that. But yeah. So at the end of the day, this is not rocket science for L&D, and I'm saying this with tough love a bit. The answers are out there. On top of adding to what Leslie said about getting off your keister and going off and see the people and talk to them and understanding the business, and even having the courage to say it's affecting it. Have that courage to say that no, we're not the answer here. We might be a band-aid solution, but we're not the answer to solving your problem. Have the courage to say that. But I always said the answers are in front of you. If an organization is running well, and it's never perfect. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to try and be holier than thou here about organizations. They're not perfect, but the ones that function well and are working on sort of all cylinders kind of thing, have their metrics set forth very clearly, their performance expectations. And those performance expectations are key because those performance expectations are like the answers to the test, right? If you're in school and the teacher says, I'm going to give you all the answers to the test, all you needed to do is figure out the questions. I think I'd be relatively happy. I'm not be perfect here, but I got the answers to the test and I just have to match them with the questions. If I see the answers, the performance metrics up front of the department, I can go out now and start asking a series of questions to try to get to the root cause and find out how I can help
In other words, it's Jeopardy.
them. I really get annoyed, and I'm being very sincere here. I get really annoyed to the learning department. And they say, we have no idea how, why our training is not working, or why they don't like our training, or we keep putting training out there. Well, start shoving it on them and start finding out what they want and solving their problem, and get them to pull it from you. Get them to say, yeah, that was good. Can you do more of that little black magic you're doing in helping us solve our issues?
One thing I find interesting.
Think of a therapist when you go to counseling. The therapist sits there and listens to you and asks you key questions to draw out your trauma, right? I mean, I hate to use that analogy. They draw it out, and eventually, at the end of the conversations over time, they are able to help you solve and resolve that conflict. And so you need to do the same thing, Rick.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times what we see is people constantly saying we don't want the learners to advance until they've heard every single thing on this page or read it. And it's like, you're just going to frustrate the users. Why are you doing this? No, you got to do it. So you have a 20-minute course that now takes 40 minutes as they have to laboriously go through everything, read it. And if they're readers and they have to listen, they're stuck because they have to wait for the audio to finish, because it won't let that next button go until, these are things that happen all over the place. They think that if you force somebody, you use the word force, you force somebody to learn, they'll learn. No, they'll just resist. They'll do it begrudgingly, and they'll just wait. They'll do something else. Oh, right, audio's done, hit next. They don't realize that forcing somebody doesn't change any of the behaviors. They'll just figure out a way around it.
Oh, and absolutely. So we keep pushing technology. Like when I say we, the L&D keep saying we need more of this wonderful technology, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Then start using the technology, because as I said before, when you talk about technology to a business leader, that E in front of eLearning, by the way, is not about electronic or whatever we want to put in front of it. For them, it's about efficiency and effectiveness. That's what the E. You're making that learning more effective and efficient. And so, to your point, Rick, rather than try to force this, say crap instead of what I was about to say, force this crap into somebody's head, and hopefully it sticks, which is still a lot of L&D people are doing this. I'm sorry to say, but I know people are going to clamor back at me here, but I still see it a lot. Why don't you leverage the technology to do something like a just-in-time deployment, where people need to access the information when they need it and learn it? And most learning happens like that, right? You and me, I don't know, I built my deck that way. In the last summer, I was using YouTube to find out the little key points I need to learn at that moment in time. And then now it's stuck. I know how to do it. But it took me like a minute or 2 or 5 minutes to learn it. Yep. And I was done. So, anyways.
Well, that movie says that we're done. That music says we're done.
Really?
That was good. I mean, there's still more to talk about with CLOs and learning and the overarching part of learning, because most companies are either getting there, have gotten there, or don't even know where to start. So it is something that it's still pretty important. Well, thanks for showing up again, especially on short notice, Ajay. We always appreciate you. Leslie,
I love you
likewise.
Guys.
We've all had Skype and other issues today. It's just one of those days. So we're sorry if we start a little bit late, but that happens. All those variables, again, we can't control. And we will see you next week on eLearnChat. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.